From KPFK in Los Angeles, California, Valley Free Radio in Florence, Massachusetts, WNUC in Detroit, and BikeTalk.org worldwide, this is Bike Talk.
Bike Talk.
Welcome to Bike Talk. I'm Taylor Nichols.
And I'm Nick Richard.
Hey, Nick.
Yay.
You know, I don't know if other cities do this around the world, but Los Angeles, when they do a marathon, they do a bike ride before the marathon on all of the empty streets. And it is a great bike ride. Do you know if other cities do it? Does New York do it and stuff like that?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know.
Well, you know, it started in LA about 25 years ago. Honda would actually sponsor a ride on the track of the marathon. And then after 3 or 4 years, I don't know what happened, Honda and Acura stopped doing it on a legal basis. So then Don Ward, our friend Don Ward from the Midnight Riders, started this whole marathon crash ride. And it was an illegal ride. We got on that road and the cops hassled us. And it was a race, too. I remember riding it in the early aughts. And it was a full-on race on the same track of the marathon. And over the years in Los Angeles, it has kind of settled down. There was a couple of years where the police were involved in the ride and sort of led the way. But on Sunday morning, when the marathon in LA took off, there were no cops around. And there were about 1,000 people, 1,000 people on bikes, all kinds of people, I might add, riding this track at 4 a.m. And it is such a fun ride because everyone rides hard. Yeah. It's not like they're just cruising around. People are pushing it.
Well, it used to be a race.
Yeah, the crash race, right.
They had like people come out there who were, you know, I guess pros or semi-pros, right?
Yeah. And just serious bike riders.
And you.
And me, I'm a serious bike rider now.
Yeah, no. I know.
But I got to tell you, it's really fun to get up at 3 a.m. and meet everybody at this area by Tang's Donuts and start around 4 a.m. This year, because of the time change, I got up around 2:15 in the morning. And the difference with that is the bars were closing. So the streets were still pretty crowded with crazy people when we started.
Tang's is where?
Well, it's in Silver Lake.
Okay.
For people who know LA and stuff like that. But I don't know if other cities do this. So if your city has a marathon and has a crash ride, let us know and we'll promote some of those also so that more people can enjoy 26.2 miles of open city streets.
It's a good idea. Yeah. Maybe this will inspire.
Yeah.
A ride. Yeah. A crash. All right. Then you got some sound.
I got some sound. Here we go.
The marathon crash ride, and who's here but
Reverend Joe Borfo.
Hey, man, how you doing?
Great. Here we are again.
How many people are out here this morning?
Gosh, it looks like several hundred.
Oh, at least, no, down there.
Yeah.
And tell me why you're up at 3 a.m.
Well, I haven't done this in like more than 10 years, but I used to do it.
Yeah.
And I just decided, why not? Let's do it again.
The streets are open.
Yeah.
All right. Who do we have here?
Jan.
Hey, Jan. How many times have you done the crash?
This is my first time.
No way.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Are you going to go all the way to Santa Monica? Or are you going to turn around where the race turns around? What?
I'm going to go all the way to Santa Monica.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And how about you?
This is my 4th time.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Dave? Okay, all right. Well, it's good to be out of here, you guys. So I'm at the finish line of the crash. It was about a 20-mile ride. I'm here with Joni Young, who's an advocate and a supporter. Joni, how you doing?
I'm doing really fine.
Tell me about your ride, yeah.
Well, you know, the thing is, I try to do this every year. There have been years where I just got lazy and felt like sleeping in. Not this year. And because the weather was great. I mean, it was kind of warm, I thought, but it looks good. I mean, the weather's good right now. Actually, it's getting cold, finally.
Yeah, and you're going to stay and work for the marathon, too, you said.
I am. I'm here at the pier right now, but I'm on my way back to Century City to work the finish line.
Well, it's a great crowd here. It's a real mix of people, no?
It is. And, you know, the funny thing is, I know people here, but it's so dark you can't really see people. This is fun. Now, I think a lot of people are headed back to the start. They've all left. Some people are going to hang around and look for coffee.
Joni, thanks.
Yeah. Well, good talking with you.
So that was Joe Borfo and Joni Young and others who are big bike advocates and big bikers. I also saw Eli Kaufman there from Bike LA. I saw Damian Kevitt there from Safe Streets Are for Everyone. Mm-hmm. So there were a lot of...
All these are Bike Talk friends, guests.
FOS, right?
You're friends of Bike Talk. Yeah.
Oh,
Joni
FOBT?
FOBT. Joni's a big friend of the show for a long time. And biking in LA.
Well, I got to tell you, Joni is crazy because she has done 50 marathons running.
Wow. Yeah. And she bikes everywhere, like from one end of the city to the other. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, business for the top of the show. Please give us a positive review. Show us where your review is, and we'll send you Bike Talk stickers.
Absolutely.
Also, check out our bookshop, biketalk.org. We're very proud.
And we have some really wonderful books on there. Simon Parker's book is on there.
He's the last episode. You can Bike Across America. And he's
on tonight also. He's on today's show also, right? And while you're doing that, follow us on Spotify, on Apple Music, whatever platform you listen to. Follow Bike Talk.
All right. Now, just a little piece of news as for the newsy portion of the show. Congratulations to Oregon, which just this past week passed HB 4007 to define and protect access to e-bikes and micromobility while tackling the e-moto problem. I got that on Blue Sky. And we just last week talked about CalBike's similar bill. And it's all because of scary bills like the one that passed in New Jersey.
Right. So it's really great to see some of these organizations getting out in front of this problem.
And here we have Ann Savage from
the New York Bicycle Coalition, and Justin Hu-Nguyen is from Bike East Bay. Justin and Ann, what is this new law? Ann, you want to start?
Sure. Of course, being a border state with New Jersey, New York is watching very carefully what's happening in New Jersey, both as advocates and our legislature, we believe, is looking real carefully at what New Jersey is doing. There are additional requirements for registration and insurance, and additional requirements for licensing, and some additional helmet requirements. And one of the things that's particularly interesting is that New Jersey seems to have decided to use a different set of classifications than the ones that the rest of us are using. So they don't perfectly align to the class 1, class 2, class 3 definitions that the rest of us are using. New York states don't perfectly align with the rest that the federal government established, but ours are closer. And I do think that's adding to the confusion about what the real impacts of the New Jersey law are.
Do you think this is in reaction to the e-moto issue that's out there?
We believe, and when I say we in this case, I mean New York Bicycling Coalition and the other advocates I work with regularly, that the real heart of the danger is these devices that are illegal, certainly in New York State already, and they are high-speed devices that are dangerous, particularly for the people that are riding them. And there's a real consumer fraud concern that they're being marketed as e-bikes, even though they are not street legal, at least not in our state. So yes, I think the safety concerns are exacerbated by the impact of these high-speed devices. To be clear, the impact is primarily on the folks who are riding them. We have people who are riding a bike, what looks like a bicycle, but is an illegal device at 50 miles an hour with no helmet or with a bike helmet, which is not designed for the purpose. And that's a real problem.
Justin?
We're seeing this reaction here in California as well. We got legislation out this past Friday kind of requiring licenses and license plates for all class 2 and 3 bikes. People are missing the mark. There's a sense of like this e-moto issue, which has been challenging, that is already illegal in California. Right. How do we enforce truth in advertising? How do we educate parents and store owners of what the truth is? These fines and the structures don't really create that bike culture that we need to make happen. And I think overall, what we're also missing is the biggest danger on the streets is still cars. Cars are still the plague that is dragging everyone, drivers, pedestrians, walkers, and e-motors are just kind of the newest flavor. But still, the data is showing that unsafe road design, big, fast cars are the primary villain here in our streets, unfortunately. We're trying to figure out how do we support local incentive programs? How do we get people to buy legal e-bikes? encouraging what is the right kind of bike, right? If we give parents $1,000 to buy their kids a legal e-bike, they're going to buy a better bike than what they can buy on Amazon. So these punitive patchwork laws and class 1, 2, 3 is not a perfect system. How do people go across jurisdictions and feel they are safe and empowered and not going to be over policed?
They are making all e-bikes, the class 1, 2, and 3 suffer because of these e-motos, which aren't even class 1, 2, 3. And if you have to license and even get a license sticker, those kinds of things deter people from riding bikes. We don't want to punish people who are, just commuting to work on a class 1, 2, or 3 bike because these e-motos have hit the streets.
This is one of the points that we're trying to make regularly in New York State, which is that legal, low-speed e-bikes are affordable, accessible transportation in New York, right? Much of New York State does not have an effective transit system. E-bikes, real ones, legal ones, low-speed, safe e-bikes are providing an affordable way for New Yorkers to move around their communities. And New York is a very expensive state. We are routinely one of the most expensive states in the country, depending on whose numbers you look at. And car ownership is rapidly becoming unreachable for large percentages of our community. We have very high car insurance rates, especially downstate, and those factors are reducing the number of people who own cars. And e-bikes can really be that bridge for affordable transportation. And so there's a lot of talk about affordability right now, and e-bikes are affordable, accessible transportation for folks. And our position is that we need to not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's take the affordability, let's take the accessibility, let's take the climate improvements of e-bikes and keep them while still protecting people from the illegal devices that are truly a problem for folks. If you are a pedestrian on the street, the thing you should be most concerned about is whether you are going to have a crash with a car. That clearly is a higher frequency danger and a higher impact.
Right.
But from the physics mean it's worse to get hit by a car than it is to get hit by a much lighter device. But it's disruptive, right? When we have a person riding an e-moto 30 miles an hour in the wrong location, right? And we do have that issue, and that is a concern, and it's a legitimate concern. We just need to make sure that the level of attention that gets in terms of enforcement is proportionate to the risk it's creating.
And I think that's something that we're trying to talk to lawmakers how to focus on what is the proportionate impact. But I think something we're also seeing is the communities that we hear the most complaints by and lawmakers, they're the communities that have built the least protected, separated, safe bikeways. And everyone's crowding on these multi-use paths that were great with low speed, but once that 6-8 feet is being used by different shape cargo bikes, e-bikes, delivery robots, it becomes crowded. And when someone's going higher speed, maybe not the speed of a car, but still pretty fast, the conflicts happen. So we're seeing the communities that are, that have traditionally resisted building safe infrastructure are hearing the most complaints, because these are oftentimes wealthy communities that are really haven't want to make those trade-offs of safe infrastructure, and now they want their kids to leave the house, but they also want their kids to be safe, and they're reaching a tension point where maybe we do have to make our city safer so people can make better choices, because people are going to bike on what's the safest option, and sometimes that's a sidewalk where
right.
a Shero on a 45 mile per hour arterial, even on a e-moto, may not feel great for most kids. The policymakers have to think about how we build our cities to accommodate these different modes and different speeds.
Motor vehicles are anything that is not human powered, everything. And then they accept a certain other categories like class 1, 2, and 3 e-bikes, like ATVs that have their own separate part of the New York law. But anything that doesn't fall under one of these exemptions is a motor vehicle. And a motor vehicle needs to meet certain criteria and get registered and licensed and all of that. And if it can't meet those criteria, it's not legal on the streets of New York right now. So it's an enforcement question, not a regulation question. We don't need new laws. We just need to enforce the ones we have.
We will keep on this and keep watching it and keep trying to get the word out there about exactly what you just said, and that there are laws on the books right now which will affect e-motos. I love what you said earlier. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater with banning class 1, 2, 3 e-bikes just because of e-motos. Justin Hu-Nguyen of Bike East Bay, and Savage of New York Bicycle Coalition. Thanks for all you do, and thanks for coming on the show and helping us with this issue.
Thank you so much for having us.
Happy to be here.
And, Nick, I just think that makes us and everybody aware how important this New Jersey law is and how we have to get out there and put a stop to these kinds of bills.
And they're happening everywhere, these anti-e-bike laws, e-bike lash.
Yeah.
Here is Karen Whitaker with news about the automatic emergency braking bill that is making its way through Congress, into Congress. I don't know, but we're trying to get it into cars. They already have it in Europe. And I wouldn't have thought they could do it here now in cars in America, but it looks like they're making some headway.
Oh, that's great. Europe has a lot of things. Europe has those side guards on trucks that protects lives. So they are in front of us in a couple of ways. But thanks to people like Karen Whitaker, we're moving closer.
Karen Whitaker, Deputy Executive Director of the League of American Bicyclists. You have a piece of legislation?
Thanks for having me. The Magnus White and Safer Streets Act is moving through Congress, and we have a big deadline on March 25th. It's at the committee process, and the members of the Energy and Commerce Committee in the House will be voting. And if the bill passes that committee, it will become part of the larger transportation bill.
What is it? What does it do?
What it does is require new cars to have automatic emergency braking that is tuned for bicyclists and motorcyclists. This is something we've been pushing for a while. It's already required in the European Union. In fact, it has been since, I think, 2022. And it just seems crazy that we don't have it here because it's the same manufacturers building the same cars. But when they sell them in Europe, they include bicyclists' automatic emergency braking. And when they sell them in the US, they either don't include it or they put it as part of a luxury package and charge extra for it.
Wow. And so this puts us closer to having this?
This does. It's named after a young man, Marcus White, who was a champion mountain biker and cyclocross racer. He was 17 in Colorado coming back from his last practice before he went off to Worlds. And he was hit and killed by a woman who fell asleep at the wheel.
If this bill had been passed.
The bill had been passed and the car had automatic emergency braking. It should have at least slowed her down. It may have given him a chance. And in a lot of cases, can save lives or at least reduce the injuries.
Is there any estimate of how many lives will be saved by having this technology in all cars sold in the U.S.?
The Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, which is an organization, it's funded by all the insurance companies, and they actually run the tests. So they crash vehicles into each other. They, run a bicycle in front of a vehicle to see what will happen. And they have published their data, which says that a system that is designed to address the three most common deadly crash scenarios could prevent up to 26% of bicycle crashes and 52% of fatal crashes. In the House of Representatives, it's already gone through one set of votes at the subcommittee level. It's now on March 25th will be in front of the full committee. And if it goes through that, it will be added into the larger transportation bill that's going to go in front of the full House of Representatives. We expect some version of that larger transportation bill will become law. If it doesn't become law this Congress, then it will become law after the elections. There may be some other things that slow it down. But this is a big deal. We've never gotten it this far before. We have a little bit of momentum going here.
Well, how is it happening if the current Congress or the administration is trying to take out the start-stop feature in cars, or it seems like they're going in a different direction?
That's a great question. This administration is trying to cut down on regulations. In fact, they've said for every new regulation Congress passes, they're going to get rid of 10. But they can't really do that, right? What are they going to do? Get rid of the regulation for seatbelts? And we are beginning to see Congress push back. Congress recently said, you can't just cancel grants. You have to let us know. You have to have a reason. So we're hoping that Congress will see this bill They'll see the data and say, okay, we should be required to do this. In the last bill in 2021, they required automatic emergency braking for pedestrians. So this is just one more step in our road to having safer cars.
We already have automatic emergency braking for pedestrians. I didn't really know.
We've passed the rule. It's going to take a couple more years. They give manufacturers, I think, 5 years to actually implement it. But we are seeing more and more cars included as standard, and we'll get there soon. So that's what we want for bicyclists. We want the USDOT to create a rule that new cars have to have it, and then we'll see the manufacturers work towards that. And some manufacturers, so BMW, Subaru, Hyundai, they have it already in some models, so they know how to do it. And once they see the rule go into place, we'll see more and more car manufacturers included as standard, even before the rule is permanent.
This is good. You're going against the tide.
It's still a hurdle, but we're hoping we can get over that.
Very good. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you.
Now we have Charlie's news.
Charlie's news. Dun, dun, dun.
Hey, it's Charlie with this week's news. Starting out, the Bicycle Film Festival, a worldwide event celebrating bikes and bike advocacy, is now accepting submissions for their event in September of this year. They accept both short and feature-length films as long as they have to do with bikes or bike culture. Submissions are due May 7th, and you can find out more at bicyclefilmfestival.com/submit. From the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, a group formed last year by Bike PGH, the City Department of Mobility and Infrastructure, and Access MOB Pittsburgh launched a crowdsourced survey of the state of Pittsburgh's sidewalks. The group is called the Safe Sidewalks Crew, and over 150 volunteers have covered more than 1,300 sidewalk segments. The data is used to prioritize projects and advocate for funding, and the goal for 2026 is to have 2,000 sidewalk segments covered. From the New York Times, a major win for congestion pricing came March 3rd when a judge ruled against the Trump administration, deeming New York's congestion pricing toll legal. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy tried to argue that the congestion pricing overstepped the reach of the federal program used to authorize it. The MTA immediately sued. Not only was congestion pricing deemed legal, Trump's bid to undermine it was deemed illegal. And from Streets Blog San Francisco, there are now new rules which significantly restrict what kind of bikes can be brought on Caltrain cars. Tires can't be wider than 3 inches, the length of a bike can't be more than 6 feet, and no bags or panniers can be attached, including child seats and trailers. Advocates warned years ago that not enough space was being allocated to bikes on the trains, and now commuters and families will pay the price for it.
Charlie's moving on, too.
Yeah.
After April.
Yeah, we have to talk about that. You know, the couple of things that Charlie mentioned, I think that we want to really keep on are the Bicycle Film Festival. The festival is next September, but the films are due by May 7th. And it can be a feature, a short, bike culture, bikes, anything. And I think that's a great way to keep the word out there that bikes are pretty effing cool by making a movie about them.
Yeah, those are always good.
And the other thing was congestion pricing in New York. Right. That was found to be legal, that New York can do what they want with their streets.
After the president pooped all over everyone with his crown, it's a way of saying, it's not, you can't do that.
Right. We have a packed show. Simon Parker is back on talking about his book, A Ride Across America. We also have Michela Grasso, who wrote a really interesting article about how bikes and protests and world wars all connect somehow.
Let's go on to Michela Grasso.
We've been talking a lot lately about how bikes are great at a protest, great way to get to a protest, great way to get out of a protest. But bikes are also a form of protest themselves, and we've talked about that also. Today we have Michela Grasso on the show, and she is a research fellow at the Urban Cycling Institute in Amsterdam. She's Italian by birth. She's written an amazing article called Pedaling Through a History of Struggle. Michela, welcome to Bike Talk.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your article and what you mean by pedaling through a history of struggle and how the bike played a part in the resistance in World War I and in World War II. It's a really fascinating article, and I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about it.
Yes, so I had the interest for this article around a year ago in April. April is the month of World War II in Italy. In Europe, let's say, it's the Liberation Month.
Right.
So all the countries have their Liberation Days around April or beginning of May. So I thought, let's make a themed article for this month and let's write about the resistance movements. And initially, I just wanted to write it about the Italian resistance because the bike was widely used during World War II. But then I realized by doing a bit of research that it was much more widespread and that the history of the bike as a form of resistance and protest is actually much older, and it goes back to the beginning of the workers' movements. So I don't know, in the UK, with the first factories, the first bikes, and people using them en masse to go to work,
right,
and being in a collective, like moving collectively. And that also brings to a different kind of collective movements that is more of a social movement. And then throughout conflicts, of course, bikes have been used in both factions. So bikes have been used by, by the Japanese army, during the World War II, or also by the Nazis, but also they've been used by resistance fighters, for example, in the case of the article, in Italy or in France or in the Netherlands, because they served the purpose of being very quick and being able to go on different types of terrain, not being very loud. And
you also write silent, which I think is so great. You can be stealthful on the bicycle.
Exactly. Yeah, there were no electric cars at the time, so cars were quite loud, and I could hear them from far away. While a bicycle, well, you barely hear it.
Right. You mentioned in the article Mussolini, an autocrat, and Nick always likes to say that you can't say the word autocrat without having auto in it.
Yeah.
But at the beginning of his reign, he pushed cars, it sounded like. And then the bicycle became kind of a form of protest against Mussolini and the fascism that was taking over Italy at the time. And I wonder if you could talk about that.
Yeah, so I think like many autocratic movements at the time, especially in Italy, there was this very strong desire of progress. And progress at the time equals speed.
Right.
I mean, speed was kind of invented at the time. Like before those years, speed was very limited. And then suddenly you had planes and you had cars. So the idea of the futurist movement in particular was this art movement that's pushed for speed and cars. They were obsessed with cars, beautiful cars, fast cars, strong, whatever. So at the beginning, that was the idea also of Mussolini. So he really wanted to push that, and he tried to draw back on bicycles, for example, so to prohibit them from specific areas. Also because they were being used by opponents of the regimes, especially at the beginning with maybe strikes, union strikes, especially in big cities in the north where it's very flat and where it was very normal to go by bike. And then afterward, once the war progressed and people started to be much poorer, then the bike was pushed actually by the regime because, it was cheaper. They didn't have to pay for gas or whatever they used at the time. So they were even trying to push people to, for example, go to work by bike or go to get married by bike because it was a way to save money. But then it was very widely used by, for example, the resistance movement in Italy was mostly in the north and in the center. And especially in the north, there were a lot of bikes because, again, it's very flat. The biggest plain of Italy is in the north. So women would play a big role in the resistance because they were able to be very undetected. Women were not seen as a threat, as a military or political threat. So most of the time they would let them go. Of course, they wouldn't fight, not all of them, but many did actually.
Right.
And they would just bring messages from one side, for example, of the hill to the other. But maybe there was like a Nazi post in the middle during a Nazi occupation, but they would be able to just pass through it because they would hide the messages in their vegetable basket or inside the bicycle frames.
Right. Yeah, I love that. I think that's a movie right there. There was also a famous Italian bicycle racer, Gino Bartali, who won the Tour de France twice, won the Giro, I think 3 times. And he also carried messages for the resistance.
Yes, I think Gino who I think might even have been celebrated by the regime because he was so fast, so quick, representing the strength of Italy, you know. But at the same time, he was also hiding, especially papers of Jewish people in his bike frame, so to free them or to help them escape. So also very strong guy who was not suspicious at all because of course he's a bike champion, he's gonna go by bike, so nobody would check it. Yeah.
Right. And he would hide it in his frame. Now they say that they hide motors in their frames of bicycle racers.
Yeah.
So, Michela, you wrote this article about bikes and resistance to authoritarian movements and protest for the Urban Cycling Institute. And what's the Urban Cycling Institute?
Yeah, so the Urban Cycling Institute is a non-profit organization. It's based in Amsterdam. And it's focused on the research and practice. So the main aim of the institute is to provide good research, like well-done research that can be translated into practice, into cycling, and in the promotion of livable cities where active mobility is at the center of the priorities.
Great, thank you. And this article is about the bike as a tool for protest. You have feminism, you have
worker strikes, all that. Yeah.
But what caught my eye was because I was searching for something about how the Nazis cracked down on cyclist unions and how the fascists in Italy were sort of allied with the automobile. And I've kind of noticed that the MAGA movement in the United States, which is pretty much most people who know what fascism is, see a lot of parallels. There's also this love of big fossil fuel engines.
Yes. Yes. No, I think there are some parallels. Like I was also making this connection between, Mussolini was a big fan of the futurist movement, which was his art movement that promoted speed and strength of the machinery because it was seen as progress. But that was around almost 100 years ago. I think nowadays, for example, when we look at cycling, we don't have the view that they had at the time maybe of weakness, so car versus bike in terms of speed. But we have these different ways of cycling. So we have cycling as something that poor people do because people who can't afford a car. So the lower classes, migrants, delivery driver. And then we have cyclists who actually are the, speed cyclists. And that's a whole other sector of society.
Right.
And I think that the main disdain that authoritarian movements have is for the poorer sector, the cyclists. This also happens in Europe with more, let's say, right-wing parties or far-right ideologies where the cyclist is seen not as a danger in itself, but as something disdainful because it's not adapting to what the rest of society is doing. So it's doing something out of the ordinary and something that poses an alternative to the myth of speed and greatness and strength.
You even write in your article that biking in urban areas is an act of resistance. And Nick and I often, say that biking in urban areas is an act of protest, against this car-dominated world that we have to navigate through. In fact, the theme of our show last week was that, cars are just in the way. And I know what you're saying when you say that bicycling was seen as sort of a sign of weakness. Of course, now I've come out, 180 degrees on that and see bicycles as the future.
That's very true, absolutely. And well, of course, in Amsterdam, maybe biking is not a form of resistance or protest. Everyone cycles. But in a very urbanized area, imagine maybe in the United States, much more than maybe Milano or Paris or Berlin. It is really an act of defiance and of not wanting to homogenize to the rest, to what it's imposed by the urban structure, so that you must drive a SUV or a big car,
Right. Talking about Mussolini and the Nazis and at one point their fear of people on bikes because bikes were protests. And you write even that the Nazis took bicycles from people. We all know that the Nazis stole art, looted art during the war. But you write that they also took away bicycles because they were afraid of how people would use them in the resistance.
Yeah, definitely. There are many historical accounts of this happening across Europe. So, for example, Denmark and the Netherlands are the most famous cases, but it's also, for example, in Ukraine or in Italy as well. I think in some cases it was because people were using them as a form of resistance, so to escape them silently in the night, in the darkness, bringing sensitive information, connecting different resistance groups, printing leaflets and distributing them. They would use bikes as a printing press.
I love that. They use that to power the printing press, right?
Yes. Yeah, because of course it was illegal to have a printing press and they were confiscated. But also what I find it very interesting is that they used them in the escape from World War II. Once they realized they had lost, what they did was steal bikes en masse and use them to flee, for example, the Netherlands and also Italy in some cases, because what was before their strength, so this big machinery, suddenly was a big risk. So it exposed them. It was very loud. The roads were in a horrible condition. So then what became a way to escape was these bikes. In the Netherlands, after the World War II, they had the saying for a few years of give us our bikes back. So they would say it when they would meet the Germans, like, give me my grandma's bike back.
Right. How do you say that?
I don't want, I know it, but I don't want to say it wrong because it might be specific. I think it was geef me on my oma fiets terug, something like that. So give me my grandma's bike back. Yeah.
I'm gonna start saying that to
the Germans.
I don't know, to the Germans. Right. So Michela, also in your article, you talk about women's empowerment in history through the bicycle.
Yeah, what I find very interesting about the bike as a form of defiance and protest is also how it served the feminist movement at the beginning. So by providing a way to get to protest, to distribute leaflets, so the usual story, but also like it provided such an independence of movement. So they didn't have to rely on someone else to bring them around or to accompany them, and they could adapt their clothes to the bike. So they could shorten their clothes and wear lighter fabrics. And it was so important in the development of the women's rights movement in Europe and in the United States. And I think it's great. And it's a story that often is not remembered. And also when we talk about the resistance in Europe, we fail to mention the women, mostly because fighters were men for the major part, even though there were so many women fighting as well. But we forget all of these women that truly did all the back work of cycling and bringing informations and also risking their lives.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it really is true. You know, we also spoke on our show recently about the critical mass rides in the United States and about how those are an act of protest. And, you know, we just did one recently that was also an act of a memorial for a woman who had been killed on her bike. So bikes really are an important part of the struggle. And that's why your article's so great, pedaling through a history of struggle. Well, Michela Grasso of the Urban Cycling Institute, thank you very much for your article and for your time.
Thank you so much for the interview.
Thanks, Michela.
First of all, you know, the Nazis stole bikes. I mean, if they weren't bad enough already, they're out there stealing bikes.
It just keeps getting worse the more you find out.
Totally. So coming up now is the second part of my interview with Simon Parker. And Simon, again, is the British travel writer who rode his bike from the very northwestern tip of the United States of America to the very southeastern island off the coast of Florida, Key West, Florida. And he just has some really great insights from the people that he spoke to about guns and dogs and the political climate, and also how wonderful America can be. There are so many great things about this country that he talks about in the interview and in his book. So here's Simon Parker. There was another issue that came up, and that was firearms and guns. A lot of people warned you to travel with a gun possibly, and you were very much against that. Yet at the end of the book, you say, if I were to live in America with my family, I would consider owning a firearm. And I wonder if you could talk about both the idea of people telling you that you should have a gun when you travel through certain areas and your resistance to that, and what made you change a little bit.
Yeah, that's an interesting subject. I mean, I'm British. I come from a culture in which we don't have guns.
Right.
And I know for most British people, if you were to do some sort of word association with the United States, I would say probably the first or second word they would associate with the US would be guns.
Wow.
It's an interesting subject to look at as an outsider. As I traveled across America, especially when I got into the more conservative states, I saw more guns.
Right.
I had experiences with people who told me that they thought that America was such a dangerous place that they wouldn't travel without a gun. And then, towards the end of the trip, I kind of came to this conclusion, because so many guns exist in the United States, and I was in some places that felt so dodgy and so potentially fractious, that I did start to come to the conclusion, and this really shook my sort of moral compass, because it wasn't a conclusion I was thinking I would have. But if, let's say, I managed to get some sort of dream job working for a major newspaper or something, and I was sent to the United States to live with my family, I did start to come to the conclusion that I would probably consider owning a gun, with the hope that I would never, ever have to use it. But having spoken to people who told me, well, if you find yourself in a situation in which someone else has got a gun, but you haven't,
right?
What are you going to do? It's such a confusing thing for me to get my head around.
Yeah.
It is completely hypothetical. I'm never going to have to be in that situation. My conclusion was that just America is so far down the path of gun ownership that it will be a society that will always be flooded with guns.
Yeah. It bothers me that you might say, in a word association game, one of the first words one might say after the word America is guns, but I'm afraid that you're right. However, you weren't really bothered by too many, nefarious people on the trip, but you were bothered by a lot of dogs. And I thought that was kind of interesting. You came up with a pretty novel way of dealing with dogs chasing you.
Yes. In Middle America, especially, the number of dogs I was encountering really ratcheted up.
Right.
I couldn't quite work out why that was, but I think because the places you're passing through are less urbanized, people live on larger plots of land. And in America, especially, with another talking point in the book, which I found quite interesting, was the idea of private property.
Right.
Private property in the United States, in contrast to anywhere else I've been around the world, is really taken very, very seriously. And that might be defending that patch of land either with a firearm or with a dog.
Right.
And as I was passing through these sort of rural areas of Oklahoma or Arkansas, for example, it wasn't uncommon for me to be cycling on a rural road, because most of the time I was following the old highways.
Right.
And all of a sudden, a Rottweiler or a pit bull would jump out of the fence or jump out of the hedge and start chasing me along the road. And this caused enormous anxiety.
Sure.
I constantly thought that I was going to be attacked by a dog. And these dogs were really serious,
right.
Like they weren't just messing around. I was in the middle of nowhere on my own with very, very big, angry dogs snapping at my heels. If I would have somehow tripped or skidded or somehow come off my bike, these dogs were going to very seriously attack me.
Right.
At one point, I had bear spray. So someone gave me some bear spray when I was up in the Pacific Northwest. For when I was sort of traveling through that area, someone said to me, "You're probably never going to have to use this on bears, but you might have to use it on a human being." Thankfully, I never had to do that. But I was getting so afraid that I was going to get attacked by a dog that I went into a local police station and I said, "I think I'm going to get attacked by a dog. What are my rights? How can I deal with this problem?" And this group of cops, they never really sort of met anyone who sounded like me, and no one had ever gone in there with a question like this. And they all spent a few minutes conferring with each other. And they said to me, "Well, if you feel like you're going to get attacked by a dog on a public road, you can defend yourself in the same way you would defend yourself against a human being." And I thought, brilliant, they've got the answer for me. They're going to give me the solution to my dog problem. And they said to me, "You got to buy a gun." And I thought, for goodness sake, this is like the most American solution.
Right.
Problem. So I thought to myself, well, Is that the answer? Am I going to have to buy a gun over the course of the next couple of days? I thought to myself, well, firstly, where on earth am I going to get a gun from? Yeah. Can I, as a tourist, go and buy a gun? But then secondly, and more importantly, do I have it in me as a human being to be carrying around a firearm and then shooting a dog at point blank range?
Right.
I don't think I do. And then more importantly, if I am in the middle of nowhere and I've just shot someone's dog, well, that's going to open a whole other can of worms, isn't it? So I thought to myself, well, all right, I need to try and find another solution to this. And I was cycling along one day and completely at random, I had one of those traditional iconic glass bottles of Coca-Cola. I was about to open this glass bottle of Coca-Cola and I accidentally dropped it and it exploded on the road like a Molotov cocktail. It created a huge, almighty roar, a big bang. And I hypothesized at that moment that if I was going to get attacked by a dog, maybe I should use this technique. The front of my bike, I had a little strap next to my pannier, and underneath it, I had a glass bottle of Coca-Cola. And a few days later, I was kind of going past this dog pound or something, and one of these dogs broke free from its shackles, and it started running towards me, and I thought to myself, I'm going to have to use this theory now. I'm going to have to test it.
See if it works.
I picked up this glass bottle of Coca-Cola and I smashed it on the road, probably about 30 feet in front of this dog. A completely humane way of dealing with the situation. No dogs were harmed in the process. And it caused such a loud bang that this dog was so afraid that it turned around and went all the way back to where it came from.
And went home, right?
Exactly. That was the scariest situation I had to deal with, and I dealt with it in a more humane way than buying a pistol.
Right, absolutely. Well, one of the things I'm worried about are cars. How was traffic? How were cars? Did they respect you? Were there places where you were really scared of the traffic, and were you able to navigate around it? Did you route yourself around traffic areas?
Yeah, there's always a balance to be struck. I mean, it depends how long you've got to go on the trip. You know, there is a balance to be struck between going on direct roads that are busy, where you're probably going to encounter more traffic who are probably going to be more aware of your presence. So, for example, there's a bit of a gray area in the US as to if you can or cannot cycle on the hard shoulders of freeways.
Right.
I have done hundreds, if not thousands of miles on the hard shoulders of freeways. I've only once been told by a cop to get off for my own safety, pretty much.
Right.
But on a couple of situations, I've had to make up several hundreds of miles, and I've done it on the hard shoulder of a freeway. And in those situations, although those roads feel more dangerous, you're in a really big shoulder, and that shoulder is essentially all for you to use. The downside of that is it's filled with all of the detritus. So lots of splinters, loads of nails, lots of rivets, which can potentially give you a puncture. What you find, however, on the country roads is people seem to be a lot more chilled out, and they seem to be a lot less as though they're expecting to see a bicycle, especially in Middle America. Yeah. When I cycled across America, I saw fewer than 10 bicycles.
Wow.
So my advice to you would be to stick to the highways because they're basically empty, but they're still pretty much looked after.
Right.
I was cycling on this long road, and behind me, I saw probably about half a mile away, a pickup truck, a white pickup. I looked back about a minute later, and this pickup had disappeared. So I assumed that it had just gone into a
field. Turned off, right?
I looked back instinctively about 5 seconds after that, and this pickup hadn't seen me, and it was careering straight towards me. And it was the closest I have ever come to being killed on my bicycle, essentially. Right. Right. And I had to divert off the side of the road, and I kind of fell down this big hill into a ditch. And the guy stopped his vehicle, and he got out, and he was so shocked. He said, "Man, I didn't even see you." And I think what you will find is on those quiet country roads that you find in places like Nebraska and Kansas, where it's just all these monocultures around you. It looks very similar. It feels very similar. And I think that can have the power of sort of luring motorists into this sort of false sense of security. Yeah. Become quite sort of lackadaisical in the way that they're driving.
Especially if they're looking at their phone.
Well, that too. Yeah, I saw loads of people looking at their phone. And also, one thing I talk about in the book is the American propensity towards automatic vehicles as well. I saw several people driving in all sorts of places with a leg hanging out of the window.
Right.
And you just think to yourself, my goodness, like that doesn't really give you much confidence.
Yeah, no, we've made driving so easy. You're totally right that it's easy to look at your phone while you're driving or something like that. The book is A Ride Across America. And Simon, I really feel like we could talk forever because I really enjoyed the read. Also, what is sort of worrying me about my trip, and I know you struggled with it on your trip, is leaving your wife. And you didn't have a child at the time, but your wife was pregnant. And, that is worrisome for me. I'm going to be gone for, 8 or 10 weeks away from my wife. My children are grown, so that's different. But how did you deal with that sort of separation anxiety?
Yeah, I mean, this is something which I try to talk about in all of my books. My first book, I cycled 3,500 miles around the UK during the pandemic, just before I got married. That book is called Riding Out, and it's kind of a play on words. It's about trying to get through tough moments in your life. Not only was the pandemic happening and my career was essentially falling apart, but I also lost some very close friends at that time. So it was kind of about trying to get through a challenging moment in my life. My journey across America happened at a time when my wife was expecting my daughter, who is now almost turning 2, which is quite crazy. She was heavily pregnant when I went off to do this journey because I kind of felt like this journey had to be done in the lead up to the presidential election. As a journalist, you're always looking for a hook, a decent peg to hang the whole thing on. But it's getting harder and harder for me to do these trips because, I feel like I'm abandoning my family, not just physically, but emotionally. It's very tough. You make a commitment to your wife or to your partner that you're always going to be around. However, my wife has, fortunately or unfortunately, married someone with immense wanderlust.
Right.
I have put that into my job and it helps pay the mortgage, but it does involve me going away for weeks at a time. And that does put immense strain on the family, especially now with a baby. I'm currently traveling all around the UK again to every national park in the UK for my new book, which is coming out at the end of this year. And I never could have imagined the emotional impact it's placed on everyone because I need to be at home. My wife actually came out twice to see me while she was heavily pregnant. I'll be honest, she probably didn't have quite the positive experience that I had.
Right.
While I was cycling every day, she was kind of hanging out in fast food restaurants trying to find a Wi-Fi connection.
Maybe soon you'll start doing some of your trips with your daughter or something like that. So,
well, that is the dream. Yeah. So one thing I mention in the book is that I'd love to go back and do this trip with her. If I can, I'd really love to keep doing these books, especially in the United States. If I could find a publisher or a TV company or something that wanted me to just cycle around America forever, it is just such a rich vein of fascinating stuff. And the thing is, it's like these closing doors moments. You could literally turn off in one different direction at a fork in the road and have a totally different experience. You could just zigzag around forever and just find fascinating people.
Right.
I'm keen to keep doing stuff like this, but it has to be struck with a balance with my family life, definitely.
Sure. That's a very positive note to end on. Simon Parker, I thoroughly enjoyed reading the book, and I've really enjoyed talking to you. Again, the book is called A Ride Across America. Your other book is Riding Out, A Journey of Love, Loss, and New Beginnings. People can find your book anywhere, but it'll certainly be on our bookshop page at biketalk.org, so people can find it there also. But I highly recommend, if you're thinking about a long ride or you just want to experience a long ride, A Ride Across America is a great place to start. Simon, thanks a lot.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. And I'd love to come back on again and talk more. So
About your new book or more about this book, totally.
Well, yeah, whatever you want. I'm fascinated by these long form journeys, and then by all means, just let me know.
Simon. Talks about the dangers of guns and dogs. You know, those are two things that are supposed to be like typically or uniquely American. But the other problem, which I think is more of a problem for him on this trip, he didn't think of as unusual, which is cars.
And big cars. American cars are big with those big front hoods. You're right.
I mean, he was riding on highways. He fended off dogs with Coke bottles, but how are you going to fend off a truck?
With a Coke bottle or maybe a gun.
Right. Well, good show, Taylor.
I think so. We want to thank Joe Borfo and Joni Young, and we want to thank Michela Grasso, Ann Savage, and Justin Hu-Nguyen, Karen Whitaker, and Simon Parker. And of course, we always want to thank our regulars, Julie Richard, Kevin Burton, Charlie Lighthizer, Amy Ziering, Lindsay Sturman, Stacy Rendecker, and Josh Hagland.
For the bike quote, a post on Blue Sky quoted an article from The Guardian. It was a link to the article titled, U.S. stock markets close on high after Iran war drove oil prices above $100 a barrel. And Sarah F.L. Kirk on Blue Sky wrote, the decision to keep pushing fossil fuels, cars, and road expansion instead of transit and active travel isn't just bad climate policy. It's looking increasingly disastrous to the economy. Who could have guessed? Time to reject car dependency.
Hear, hear.
Thanks, Taylor.
Ride safe.
This episode of Bike Talk is sponsored by the law offices of Pocras and De Los Reyes, with offices in Los Angeles and Bakersfield and serving all of Southern California.
Bike Talk is a project of CRSP and the Los Angeles Eco-Village Institute. And that was Bike Talk. If you have a story, a tip, or a topic, head over to biketalk.org and send us a message. Talk again next week.
Get on your bike, sit on the seat, put your feet on the pedal, and run all around, run all around. Get on your bike, sit on the seat, put your feet on the pedal, and run all around, run all around. Get that car out of my way, I wanna ride my bike today. It keeps me fit, gets me there, I won't go stinking up the alley behind the daily grind. Let your mind unwind, if it's life, pretend to life, better get yourself a bike. Get yourself a bike. Oh, 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 get yourself a bike.
Baby, we banged that out.
Yes.